Fabulous. So welcome everybody to the first of a series of lunchtime conversations under the umbrella title of Harnessing the Power of Your Voice. And it's part of the work that we at the Dance School Safer Working Group, Safeguarding Working Group, which is more comfortably known as Safer Dance. You are most welcome to pose questions, and to do this, we ask you to put your question into the Q&A box. Don't worry if you forget and put it in the chat box, because we'll do our best to pick them up. Please keep your questions hypothetical without mentioning names or location. And I'm going to just hand over to Erin briefly to explain that Q&A box works.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erin Sanchez. I am the Manager of Health, Wellbeing and Performance at One.UK. We are very proud to be a part of the Safer Dance Working Group. And I just wanted to explain to you a little bit about the Q&A box. So if you wish to ask a question at any point during this session, we welcome you to put your questions into the Q&A box. In order to do that, if you're on a computer, you navigate to the bottom center of your screen. You'll see a menu come up, and you'll see a Q&A option in that menu. If you click that, you'll see that there'll be a little box that will come up, and you can add your question there. You can add it anonymously. So if you'd like to ask a question without showing your name, you can do that. We also have allowed you to upvote questions. So if there's any question that you see already in the Q&A that you think you would also like to hear answered, please do feel free to upvote that question by clicking next to the question itself. If you do put anything into the chat box, we will also add that into the Q&A box, so that gets addressed as well. All right, if you need anything from me, I'm in the chat as well.
Thank you so much, Erin. So I'm Imogen Knight, as you can see from the title on my Zoom box here, and I'm a founder member of Safer Dance and also part of the committee, along with Erin and Laura, and Peter here is our chair. And so before we get to today's topic, I'd like to introduce Peter Flew to you all, and he will talk about the overall work of Safer Dance Group.
Thank you, Imogen, and thank you for coming, Martin. My name is Professor Peter Flew. My day job is Dean of the School of Education at Roehampton University, but as a non-exec role, I'm a trustee of the Royal Academy of Dance. I had the initial idea for the group in 2020 when, as a former primary school teacher and safeguarding lead, I realised that there was no actual regulation in the dance sector, and there's nobody making sure that all dance schools were safe. And so I put a call out for like-minded people, and from the very start, there have been 6 of us on the working committee, and we do most of the work supported by the rest of the members of the group. So a big thank you to Imogen, to Erin and Laura from One Dance UK, Mike Hawkins, who's a former member of CEOP and National Crime Agency, and a ballroom dancer, and Fiona Becker from NSPCC. So we meet every month, we look at what resources we think that the industry needs. We're not a official charity, we haven't got a bank account, we are just a group of people who are working together to provide resources and improve safeguarding. The group's now got 75 members, including members from every major dance organisation, both senior and both dance teachers as well as people interested in safeguarding generally. So our work is to support dance teachers, to guide dance teachers, and to challenge dance teachers and dance associations to get better at this. And we're really looking for a race to the top with dance associations who can be the best at safeguarding. And I'm pleased to say that there are some great strides have been made in the last couple of years on safeguarding. So we have a website, which I couldn't work out how to put in the chat because I could only chat to myself. So I put it on my name. So if you type that in, you'll be able to find that. Recently, this is, I think, the 4th of lunchtime conversations. They're all on our website and on our YouTube channel as well. We've created a long checklist for dance teachers on how to get safeguarding right, and a short checklist, just an aid memoir as well. We liaise with other organisations. We liaise with the NSPCC regarding a document about abuse in positions of trust in dance, and working with a Paul Stewart training organisation for a free course in safeguarding. We've done a guide to recruiting a specialist dance teacher if you're a school, and we have more ideas in the pipeline. So we're welcome to any members or anybody who wants to join the group or do ideas. The one that came up with last week's meeting was after Ian McKellen talked about intimacy coordinators and acting was a ridiculous thing, that we agreed that it wasn't a ridiculous thing, but who's teaching dance teachers about intimacy when they're doing dancing? So perhaps we can do something on that. That's on our radar as well. So please enjoy this talk. I won't talk for any more because it's not about me at all. It's about what Martin can give us. And I'll hand back to Imogen.
Thank you, Peter. So just to recap why we're here today, we as dance teachers, and myself a dance teacher as well, we know that effective use of your voice is one of your primary teaching skills. And much of the success that a dancer achieves is a direct result of how they receive feedback in the practice studio, throughout their career, not just when they're training. And beyond that, the atmosphere in class, or more widely across your school, is influenced by the way the teacher and or leaders communicate at all the touch points, whether the audience is a parent, a student, or a colleague, etc. I am sure that we would all agree that there is a huge power in the words and how we use them and the words that we choose. So for a dance teacher committing to providing a safe space in which every individual can flourish as a dancer and as a person, using our voices effectively to set a good tone, making time and space for different learning needs so that the whole community benefits, how we use our voice is fundamental. But it's not always easy, and it's a constant personal growth space. The aim of harnessing the power of your voice lunchtime sessions is to empower you to support your students through your language in the dance studio. We are used to providing multiple images to describe the same movement to different students, and we are used to making rapid adaptations for physical differentiation or standard learning style preferences. However, when someone's learning challenges are not visible or perhaps well understood by themselves, this can make the world of difference to their confidence, your confidence, and success in the class. There is always also a language around neurodiversity which can feel intimidating and perhaps impenetrable at times to us as dance teachers. So today, our focus is on supporting that diverse student body to help you to increase your awareness and confidence in using inclusive language and to give some tools and updated vocabulary that can be immediately applied into your practice. And so to help us with this, I am delighted to welcome Martin Wilson from Tin Arts to talk to us about what neurodiversity really is, how we can be effective teachers in a neurodiverse world. And Martin, thank you very much for sharing your time with us today. Please, would you kindly introduce yourself and the work of Tin Arts and then continue on to make your presentation and share your wisdom with us?
Sure, thank you. Hi, thank you, Imogen. Hello, everybody. So, yes, I'm Martin Wilson. I'm the director of Tin Arts, and I will talk through some slides for about 10 minutes, if that's okay, which I'll just start to share my screen. This will all be seamless and work great. And hopefully, and Imogen will give me the thumbs up if you can see the slides. Perfect. Okay, great. I think it's important to start with some context. You get a sense of who I am, because we will all work in different contexts and different places and spaces with different audiences across the UK. So I am a trained dancer. I graduated in '97, which seems like a very long time ago. And I spent most of my years developing Tin Arts as a leader and teacher. And more so recently, I guess I've moved into more of a strategic role where I do a lot more of the development work, but we still have a strong artistic team delivering the work. 1999 we were formed, so 24 years in the making, and we're based in Durham City in the northeast of England. We have a vision and mission, like most organizations, as you can see in front of you. We believe in a world where everybody has access to the arts, whatever arts practice you are interested in doing. And the bit that we do, our mission, Tin Art, is actually about removing barriers and trying to find those barriers and remove them. And I will talk a lot about barriers today. And so I know this session is about your voice and your language, your information. And actually what I guess I'm sharing with you today is an approach towards discovering the information which helps you make those choices going forwards. So I shall whiz you through our slides. So it's about my and Tin Art's journey. This is, and it's very kind of Imogen to say, I'm sharing you my wisdom. I guess I'm sharing you our experiences we've acquired over the years. This is not to say this is the absolute correct answer, and this is the way, but I hope there is something in there that might inspire you or influence you to go and look and seek further and to see other ways. There are lots of ways people do things, and this is the way we have discovered works for us. And actually what it is all about is about that access to the arts. And everything's informed as well by the type of society we as an organization believe in, which is essentially that children and young people engage in dance with us and we are contributing towards them as global citizens. Some young people do make the pathway forwards and they go on to dance and they go on to be teachers of dance. And 2 of our artists we work with, we met when they were 7 and they're now teachers in our organization. And that's brilliant. That's amazing. The majority of young people we meet do not follow dance as a vocation. They go off to do many other wondrous things. So we understand that we are, for a short while, we are custodians helping them explore and discover the world. So that's what we're about, and that's where we're coming from. And then a lot of my conversation today will be about the social model of disability. And then I'll talk about that in a bit. So that might be something new or you've heard before, but I will come back to it shortly. A little bit more context, because it helps to understand what kind of dance organization we are, so you can compare and contrast. So we have a studio, and through the daytime, we deliver non-accredited dance training programs for people who are 18 years plus with a learning disability or who are autistic. In the evenings, that turns into our out-of-school classes. So we have young people attending between 4 and 18 years old, and they are up to 24 disabled. And then we work in SEND schools across the Northeast. So very busy artistic team delivering in lots of different places and spaces. And often, a lot of the dance studio work and SEND schools work arrives in performance work, which then gets performed in theatres, outdoor festivals and settings across the Northeast of England. As a scale, about 50 workshops a week, 400 participants, more than 60% of them identify as disabled. And that's across all, they're not in pockets, that's across all our activities. Contemporary dance, regular performance opportunities, and importantly at the bottom, no examinations. We don't follow any external frameworks or examinations. And I'm happy to talk through those things and talk to that later on, but just as a context about where we are and what we do. Hopefully that gives a sense of the scale. There's about 12 artists in the organization working throughout the week, delivering all our activities. So it's also worth sharing with you what we have learned to understand around common terms. And I have put in brackets labels, not a keen word, but I've put it there for simplicity. So when we talk through today for the next 50 minutes, I'm not going to talk 50 minutes, by the way, but when the Q&A comes through as well, it's widely recognized these are the terms we're looking at. So additional needs is that global term for anyone who has a health or development condition that impacts on everyday life. Children, young people, adults, whatever age, additional needs means there is something about them where support or help or access can address that need in some form. Neurodiversity, as opposed to neurotypical, is essentially that there is a difference in how the brain functions. And that's what it is essentially. And it's a natural manifestation. It's a natural thing that happens. And we're very much of belief is diversity is actually amazing and to be celebrated and gives us perspective and gives us breadth and gives us richness in life. So we're not saying that neurodiversity is or it shouldn't be, neurodiversity is an issue or a problem. Actually, it's something to be embraced. And what our challenge is to find the best ways we can embrace the diverse ways people engage in what we do and how that works together. Learning disability and difficulty is often confusing, and many people swap them for each other. So many people might describe someone as having a learning disability and or learning difficulty, and they kind of mean the same thing. Essentially, you're talking about reduced intellectual ability and difficulty with everyday activities. And people with learning disabled or learning difficulty can be neurodiverse, but they can also not be connected into neurodiversity. So this is a difficult area. And this is something I recommend you kind of keep reflecting on and keep following patterns of behavior in society as we get to explore new terminology. Neurodiversity is a phrase I encountered probably about 6 or 7 years ago when I was in a conversation with somebody, and it was a brand new phrase for me, and I've had to unpick it and work it out for myself, how it sits in context. And I've just put a little footnote to the bottom. when you talk about specific conditions, that's when you have to delve a bit deeper and do some much better quantifiable research about what is that condition. So autism, for example, is not the same as Asperger's, not the same as ADHD, but they can be collectively described as neurodiverse, which is about that brain functioning differently. So that's not going to be the total answer for you, but hopefully that's just kind of thrown a little bit of light before we walk forwards. And the social model of disability is the bit that's going to form the rest of my conversation, really. And this is a really key principle. And it's the idea that we have collectively created society in such a way that it disables people from engaging in it fully. That someone is not disabled by the medical condition they might encounter, but actually the attitudes and the way we've created society has put barriers in place for people to engage fully. It's often easiest to think about physical access being stairs. If you were to create an open access building and you put stairs in it, you have excluded a certain number of people, for example, wheelchair users, from accessing that building. And you just have to multiply that across every facet of society and look where we put barriers in place that mean that people are not able to access equally and with equity with other people. And I put a link in there. There's a very short film online. It's about 2 minutes, 40 seconds, and it is brilliant. And every time I talk about social model disability, I show that film because it's really clear and really concise. I'm not showing it today because of time, but I do recommend that as a nice short film to have a quick look at. So if we are looking at the social model disability and actually what's happening is there are barriers in place, then the question becomes, well, how do we work out what those barriers might be? So on the left-hand side, how might we address barriers? How might we kind of gather the information that will help us understand what is stopping people from excluding and what we do? So there's actively exploring, which has just been open to the idea that if you accept there are barriers, then you are starting to actively explore barriers and you accept that they are there. That's great. And a questioning ethos. And I think that's about constantly asking why. Why are we doing it like this again? Is this the way we've always done it? Have I done it like that for 20 years? Well, surely 20 years practice, I need to kind of update myself and think about different ways of doing things. So it's about that. There is on the right-hand side, there is the word recognize in the cycle, and it's not every barrier can be reduced or removed. And maybe in time we can work systematically to change it, but some things cannot be changed. And it's okay. We can recognize those and be open about it. And I guess a lot of the themes I'll come through is about being open, conversational, discussing with people and being transparent about how we approach these things. So not every barrier can be addressed and removed. Keep asking, is this the best way to do it? But ultimately, if you want to understand what barriers, particularly children people face, particularly those who are neurodiverse, ask them. They are the experts. If they are 14 years old, they have 14 years of lived experience of being neurodiverse. Best way to do it, ask them. So on the right-hand side, here's our little circle of how we do this at Tin Arts. And like I said, at Tin Arts. So we start with the green, identify. We go out there, we look for where can we find these barriers. How do we find those barriers? By talking to lots of people with lived experience. And then we try to follow the circle. Can we remove the barrier? If we can't remove it, can we reduce the barrier so it has less impact? If neither of those things happen, do we recognize that that barrier is there? And we talk openly about how we might look at that together. Can we be really radical and redesign entirely what we're doing? Actually, does it need a bigger, not remove, reduce, but actually redesign the initial thing we're doing? And let's reflect upon that. Let's go around that circle. Let's get back to it and let's see, have we made a difference on the particular barrier or barriers we identified? And let's start again. And it is a cycle because it keeps going round and round and barriers change. What wasn't a barrier, so 2 years ago, there was a pandemic, 3 years ago, which is a barrier around access and connectivity and people who were at home with maybe not great financial footing and no access to data broadband were suddenly excluded from everything. So we had to look at how we address those barriers. Currently, now we're looking at different barriers around financial cost and transport and how you move from place to place. So the barriers kind of keep evolving and merging, and we keep going around this cycle. But this is a cycle that's worked for us. Finding your own cycle is great, but that's what we do. So why don't we talk about the ones that we, in our 23 years, these are things we most frequently find are the barriers that people tell us about. Anxiety and fear. And that's, I think that's common to all of us in all parts of society, actually, that we carry around with us an anxiety and fear that we're not going to be good enough. We're not going to fit in. It's not going to be right for us. There's a very threshold thing. I'm not going to be able to do these things. So that's one of the most frequent barriers, and I think most dance professionals I've met or teachers, they're really good at supporting people to come into a space and to feel welcomed. So the first thing is actually just to make people feel welcome and listened and valued when they come in. And then the next ones are kind of most more recognizable, I guess, but the pace of sessions is often a barrier. People find things go too fast for them, or movement is too fast for them, or the teaching of a phrase is too fast for them, and they can't gather that, they can't process the information very quickly. For example, somebody who is autistic, actually, quite often one of the impacts of that is processing delay. So actually they need time to be able to process and then to share back, so they can't instantly process straight back. Noise is quite a very common frequent barrier. That people, music is too loud, other people talking is affecting concentration. Language is the classic, the fact that dance is a codified art form, and we revert to language and things that we've learned through training, and that's not necessarily the most accessible language. That the person on the street won't have come across half of those codified phrases or terms before, so they find language quite intimidating. Inside knowledge is the idea that when you go into space, you feel like everyone else knows what the rules of the game are, but you don't know what they are. So people have a fear, a little bit like the anxiety fear threshold, but there's a set of rules, unspoken rules, that people know and we don't know. Now, sometimes, particularly with neurodiverse people, they do absolutely have a strong sense that there are other rules or other ways society interacts with each other that aren't necessarily very clear, the unspoken rules of communicating. So inside knowledge particularly relates to dance and people coming in as well. Physical access is still a barrier in some places and spaces. It's decreasing, and it's less so an issue. However, I don't know about some of yourselves, but we use a lot of community-based organizations and venues to use. And some of those community venues don't have the resource, financial resource, to make changes as quickly as they'd like to. So there are still physical access barriers around for them. The second picture is the outside the studio barriers, things that happen before young people even get anywhere near the studio. Expectations is very closely linked to that threshold idea that they don't know what to expect. They don't know what they're going to see inside. They don't know how fast this class is going to go. They don't know what's going to happen at all. And how can we find ways that we can scaffold and support people to make their steps towards us in a way that feels comfortable and it feels at their own pace. The information available about what we do, where is it available and how is it available? And again, how do we describe what we do? And interestingly, one of the key areas is who do people see in pictures? If you only see a certain type of dancer who can jeté 5 foot in the air and has the most amazing splits, I never did that. I could never do that, and I'll never do it again. But what images are we using to represent what we are doing? And do those images represent the broadness and diversity of society as well, so people can recognize themselves in activity? Again, the language we use, that default of describing, I mean, contemporary dance itself is quite a complex phrase and difficult. How do we talk about what we do? And I think one thing I'd like to say is I'm not talking about dumbing down, and I'm not talking about kind of watering out the quality of what we do. We have to hold on to our ambitious, high quality, great artwork, but we have to find a way of communicating it differently a little bit to enable more people to engage in that. Cost is a massive barrier at the moment, and I think that's a universal theme, and will go. There's also the cost of support. So if somebody has particular additional needs that need support, how are we going to get that support in place? And how might a young person wish to access activities but remain supported by friends or family or somebody else who supports them? And how can we incorporate into our space? So, list of most frequent barriers we've encountered, and the ones we seem to be addressing most often and most common are these: inside the studio and outside the studio. So at Tin Arts, again, this is very bespoke to us. How do we go about understanding how to address those barriers? What we do is we ask young people to share with us the solutions and strategies that work. For example, and I'm going to show you in a minute example, a very exact example of how we do that. But essentially, we ask the first 3 questions: to help me understand, I like to learn, and to help me concentrate. So we ask young people to tell us how can we best help you understand what the tasks are? How can we communicate with you and that works for you? How do you like to learn? Are you kinesthetic? Are you visual? Do you like pictures? How do you want to receive that information? And how can we help you concentrate? What can we do to the environment to make sure we are getting, the concentration, the best concentration you want in a session? And the fourth one is quite interesting, is that And even with all that work, and as hard as we can, there will still be times when you feel nervous and you feel worried. So please share with us, if you can, what happens when you get nervous and worried, so we can be part of that with you, and we can go along that journey with you and recognize that. And as example, which we'll go into in a minute, the kind of more detailed case example, if someone says, I like to work in small groups, you have a solution, you have a strategy. Actually, what they're also identifying is the barrier. The barrier is a space with too many people in it. It's generally too noisy. There's not enough space around them. They might feel claustrophobic. They might feel that they're not getting the support and attention they need. So the solutions can unlock the barriers and the things that they feel would stop them from accessing. So this is what an access card looks like at Tin Arts. This is what young people complete. And obviously I've taken the names and details off it. But you can kind of see the 4 boxes: to help me understand, I like to learn, to help me concentrate, and then if I feel nervous or worried. So I'm just going to fly through these. Again, I'm not saying this is the way you should do it. I'm saying this is an example of how you can get information. So to help me understand, this young person filled this in with their parent and speak slowly and in small chunks, which already tells us that actually complex language and long instructions are one of the things they want to avoid. It's a barrier for them engaging. Speak calmly. I really can't cope with loud voices. Brilliant. So the barrier, the loud voices, is straight up straight there. So we're asking young people to share that with us. We're not making any assumptions about who they are, and because of their background or context, we're asking them to own this information and share it with us. And there's a really interesting exchange going on there when the young person gets to feel empowered that they are telling you what will work best for them. I like to learn. So there's 2 things here. So on the left-hand side, by be shown how to do it and helping me feel up. So this is the young person who's interested in what Peter was saying before about intimacy, who's essentially giving us permission to use touch. He's giving us permission to use touch as a way of helping to feel what a position is and how to feel that. And it's something he clearly works in other parts of his life, in education and other social settings. The second one down is something I really quite like it. The fact that he's left-handed, his natural way, yes, he is. The fact that he's left-handed, his natural gut feeling is if you say turn, he'll go to his left. And it's a fair chance everyone right-handed will go to their right. And he's kind of saying to us, I get that. I get that I will naturally go the other way. Just be patient with me whilst I take a moment to realize that we're all going a certain direction. And I love the ownership and the honesty behind that, actually, because that's great. And that's made us think about when you are describing a turn or a change of orientation, we need to be really clear about what we're asking, actually, just kind of help people to feel that, are we asking them all to turn the right way? Or are we just asking them to turn the way that feels natural to them? Because they are really different things. To help me concentrate, so there's 2 things that the young person identified here, which is great. One is that if you give them a time limit, that just throws everything out. That's really hard. Once you mention there's a time limit on a task, he finds it really hard to concentrate, and he worries more about the time than the actual task. But he's also helped us give us a solution, and actually helps to scaffold him. And by scaffolding, that's essentially wrapping around a person the things that will help them thrive, but not doing all things for them. So in this case, this young man, I know that when we do start time tasks, that we go across, we have a different conversation. We talk about what the first 2 or 3 steps, as in steps of creation, might be, not physical steps. How might he start? And then we set him away, and then the time has faded into a backward distance. It's become more about the task and moving on with it. And we've also got a strategy where we said, and we'll keep coming to talk to you. We'll let you know when there's a certain amount of time left, and we'll let you know when there's a certain amount of time left. We know how that works for him. But we know that if we just said there's 5-minute task, off you go, and walked away into the corner, he wouldn't start the task at all. So he just needs that scaffolding. And then, like I said before, doing all that work, and we do as much as we can, there will still be times when someone's nervous or anxious or worried or is struggling to engage in activity. So what we have is that empowered relationship where we kind of be very open about what their coping mechanisms and strategies are. And the young person here is, brilliantly shared with us, if I start chewing closed fingers, I might go quiet or angry. These are signs of me being anxious about the activity we're doing here. This is what's going on. And it's brilliant for our staff team to be able to know these and recognize these. And that's how it works for you. And so, mindful time, but a couple of things. So do what works for you. Hopefully there's something in that which has helped you think about things you might want to do. But whatever you do, appropriate, fit for purpose, use it. If you ask young people or anybody for information that helps, then be active about it and don't just put it to one side and it's forgotten about, because it shows a very odd signal about how much you value that conversation and that thing. And to use that, and actually, in terms of going back to the theme of this session, which is about use your voice, constantly communicate and talk to that young person about your understanding around what they've shared with you and how you're going to do that, and keep asking more questions about how they can unlock that more for you, and review it on a regular basis. And then the leaving thoughts behind that, there are 5 things here. So I'm a big passionate believer in being inclusive is not to be switched on or switched off. It doesn't only happen when you recognize a certain need or additional need in the room. It actually makes your activity universal and it's constant. So it's always there, and it opens up what you do to all. Small changes make a big difference. Commit to something and be consistent on it, but make that one small change, and don't underestimate how big a small change that might be for somebody. It might be something they've been trying to communicate for years, and it's just one little thing, and that's just helped. Don't flip-flop from the consistent committed. Don't keep changing your mind. And if you do, be open and transparent about why you've made a change and how that change might manifest itself. If you want to know more, ask an expert. Ask the young person with lived experience of being neurodiverse, how best can I help you to communicate? How best can I help you to engage in this task? How best can I help you to enter the room? How best can I help you to? Like I said, anybody with lived experience has that lived experience from the minute they're born. They are experts at it. So why should we make assumptions about those things? And be an ally and a champion. And when you can, and you feel comfortable to, pass it forwards. How do we adopt the social model disability across whole society? We make other people aware of it. We talk about it. We have open discussion about it. We challenge each other, and we have these conversations going forwards. So hopefully that's been a really whistle-stop tour of these are the ways we gather our information, and to kind of bring it back hopefully to a neater ending. These are all the things that inform what we say, how we communicate, how we set the tone and build the environment within our dance spaces. So without this information, we wouldn't have that grounding to actually talk about what we do and how we do it, and decide what we say and how we say it. Thank you very much. I'll hand you back over to Imogen, if that's okay.
Martin, that was amazing. Thank you very, very much for giving us so much information and so thoughtfully offered to this audience, which will be diverse hopefully as well, because we'll have many different contexts among the audience here, and potentially future audiences watching the recording. So once again, thank you. One thing I was thinking as you were talking is that many of the teachers and my honoured co-professionals and people that I admire, I see using their voices in the ways that you have described already, because I think the dance is a space where we are welcoming and creative, and we are interested in people and in what's inside them as artists, and we want to bring that out. And I think that predisposes a dance teacher to be in a really good place, to be naturally warm, inclusive and interested in the people in front of them. So we think that's not to be underestimated in this audience either, and that teachers can feel confident in their natural instincts. And Martin, you must have seen this at various times, that many of those questions that you have proposed asking, I think probably are being asked naturally, but without necessarily the awareness of how important they can be to somebody who is not neurotypical. Whilst we just take a second to allow participants now to gather their thoughts and perhaps post some questions in the Q&A. And thank you very much to those people who've put contributions into the Q&A while Martin's been talking, and to ask those questions. And we've got a couple to kick off with as well, Martin. But just before we do that, I just wanted to take the opportunity just to say what our next session is, and to give you the date for that next session in this series of Harnessing the Power of Your Voice. And the next session is on the 22nd of March at 1 o'clock. and it will be focused on mental health. And we will have a panel including mental health professionals and dance teachers to engage in a discussion on the topic of supporting your learners' mental health. And we obviously welcome you to continue in this series with us. And if you are interested, we will email a joining link to all attendees from this session, as well as continue to advertise more widely. Completed that little plug. I'm going to move on to the Q&A, if that's all right with you, Martin.
Absolutely, yeah, sure.
So just starting, so the first question that came up here with 4 other people who were also interested in this question. Are there any suggestions for when working with inclusive dance groups with children who are both sensitive to noise and also including children who communicate with vocal outbursts? How do we best support all of these children to feel safe and comfortable to engage with the dance activity together in one space when there are these contrasting and potentially, mutually difficult or clashing needs? And there was a follow-up to that saying that someone would like the same question with regards, are there any specifics or differences between children and adults? So we've got one working with children age 5 to 11 and another working with adults.
Okay, yeah. So one of the problems, one of the issues, one of the challenges, I should say, of gathering in as much information as possible and having a much better understanding of how people can engage and access is you end up with, like you say, needs or support that slightly clashes with each other. So the classic being somebody needs sound or noise to be lower, and other people might be needs a space to be able to share loud outbursts or whatever it is. So there is not one set, easy, quick solution to this. It's a few things. So one is about the ethos and value you build your environment to be. So what we try and build is an awareness of each other, that we all have, everyone knows that everyone else has completed an access card. Everyone knows that everyone else has shared with the group and ourselves what those needs are and how we work. So we try to build an understanding around each other and how we can work with each other. There are some simple things we can do around space, where somebody's placed in a dance space. And actually, something else we do is we offer people a choice about where they would like to be in the space, to try and some people like to be closer to doors as well, because that gives them the option. So we try and give choice where we can. We try and share greater awareness with each other about each person's individual needs and how we can not only support that from a teacher-pupil relationship, from a peer-to-peer relationship as well, because some of this is about being around other people. There are some other solutions around some young people who attend our sessions wear ear defenders, and they wear them throughout the sessions. And it's not to say that loud noise is an issue, but a sudden loud noise can be an issue. So there's not one solution, but there's, I think it's once you develop an ethos in the space for difference and people come together, then that starts to become, it doesn't say it doesn't trigger, but it starts to become accepted, understood that these things might be acceptable and how these things work together, if that makes sense. Is there a difference between children, young people and adults? I think those people who are older have had more lived experience of how they engage, so are more likely to be aware. Younger children are arguably, it depends how young, but arguably still discovering how they connect in society and how this works. There are slightly different safeguarding concerns around information gathered and shared. The role of the family is much bigger in children and people than it is in adults. But the principles still remain really about openness, honesty, creating an environment where everyone is accepted and included, and allowing for those differences, I think.
Yeah, and fostering mutually respectful relationships, because then there's a level where if you help people to understand the people they're with, then that allows a level of predictability.
Yeah.
Which then allows people to understand that there may be a loud noise coming from that direction at certain points or in certain ways, and that becomes acceptable, whereas previously it was shocking, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. And that's the other interesting thing. That there are, and this is not the case for, I mean, I'm very careful not to generalize, but there are some examples where once we've understood better what some of those barriers are, how to learn, how to concentrate, then actually some of the reasons why sharp outbursts might come about don't occur, because we've actually built the session structure in such a way that it's worked like that. So it's the cycle. It's a cycle going round and round, going, okay, and it's exploring and testing and learning. But I think you're right. Young people, because it's back to that global citizens idea. Yes, people come together in dance session, but they come to be with each other as well, actually, and they come to be with their peers. And so actually understanding, celebrating and recognizing who your peers are and how we interact with each other, that's part of that conversation as well.
Yeah, and our dance peers are often very different from our peers and the rest of our whole life. You know, it's 1 hour a week with people we're choosing to spend our time with, as opposed to people that we have to spend our time with, possibly. And it's possibly a space where some people feel the most themselves because they've chosen this activity, because they're happy in that expression.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, the motivation to be there and why they've come. Maybe that'll get unpicked in a bit around. There's another question, I think, which might, if it's not brought up, I might bring up the question. But around motivation and why people choose to dance is an interesting kind of thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next question, Martin, that's come up, which it touches on something that you and I have discussed previously about external frameworks. And this person has referred to it as a fixed framework, because we're talking about working towards an exam. So the setting of a particular class or series of classes or a lesson format is that the majority of students might be working towards an exam, and somebody comes into that space, and so they are interested in advice or ideas around supporting the needs of a student who has specific learning needs or specific learning differences to the majority of the participants in the class, when that class structure itself, because of the ambition for that group, is such that there is that same level of choice or flexibility as there would be if you were creating a class specifically for those who are facing challenges. And you might not necessarily have the same choice in terms of content and what you're working on.
Yeah. So
again, I mean, I really think this is a conversation you and I rehearsed really with each other, because it's tricky.
Yeah, and the framework, be it an exam or be it whatever, it's not a world I particularly move around or have had. I'm a very late start to dance. So I started dancing at 21. So I've never been in a dance exam or examination framework in my life. It's not something that I'm actually that aware of. But I think there's the couple of things which come to my mind are clarity of purpose and or motivation for a young person to be in a space to dance. So I think from the outset, it's really key and important that everybody is aware about why the young person is attending, what is it they're looking for to discover personal expression, health and fitness, social connection, and some are, I guess, looking towards grades and exams and progression opportunities and pathways. So it's understanding that motivation about how they enjoy, because then you can manage their expectations about what will be achieved through that journey. And it depends about their background and context, but you can manage. I can imagine a scenario where there are people within a session who are focused towards an exam and those who aren't focused towards the exam. But if everyone understands the rationale about why they're there and what we're looking to achieve through those sessions, then those can be managed and different. I'm sure there are some variables around the pace of a session, the length of a session, how a session can be broken into component blocks to help with that stuff. Like I said, some of this stuff is slightly more outside my ballpark. But I think it's one of the barriers, which I'm not sure if I threw up there, but one of the barriers that does arise sometimes is when there has been a lack of clarity and information about what is happening and who is taking part and why something is occurring. And then you end up down this whole ball of confusion and no one can quite work out how we came to be where we are. So it goes back to, I think, to go back to the title, The Power of the Voice, the clarity and transparency and openness right from the outset to understand what motivates us to be in that space and why we're there and what we're looking to achieve is crucial. And then from there, people can kind of unpick their journey.
Yes, and I think I think possibly repeating it. in different ways as you progress through a series of classes. I think it's helpful to repeat the reasons why certain things are happening in certain ways at certain times, and to repeat that even participants within that group might be making different choices ultimately about, they might be learning some exam work but have no intention taking that exam status. They may just like the fact that an exam preparation class is quieter and more studious, so they like learning in that way, and you feel able as a teacher to engage in that way, and they can come along that pathway, but it's a parallel pathway where they will just not participate in the exam on that day because that's not the pressure that they want. They just need to improve in a different way. And I think you can signpost your classes really clearly, can't you, in terms of bringing people through. So if something is set or unset, or if there's a series of criteria that's important for a specific reason, it's about saying that out loud rather than assuming that people will instinctively understand it. Back to your point on the sort of insider language and the unspoken knowledge, where not everybody knows, not everybody understands those unspoken cues. And if you can verbalize that cue, whether it's about an external framework or whether it's just simply about a process that's happening today in this class, then it's easier to draw people along in a more inclusive and sort of way with consent, and their consent all the time to participating and feeling that they want to and they're being respected about their choices.
Absolutely. And I think what's great about consent is and consent and conversation is it removes assumption, because assumption is a really difficult area to be in when you make assumptions on behalf of and then you just plow on regardless with the thing, and then that comes undone. But yeah, I think that's really and that's really what you've said is really strong and true. And I guess I'm going to imagine there's a lot more adaptability and adaptations made as we progress through kind of examinations and structures. And I guess we're talking about the process of preparing and learning and being ready for these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so next question is, do you have any experience where staff feel they don't have the skills or resources to support the needs of an individual, or they feel it compromises the rest of the class? I think we've sort of touched a little bit on some of these things.
Yeah.
I want my classes to be open for all and inclusive, but when behaviour is extreme or dangerous, I don't know how to balance things.
Yeah, really good question. And it has happened, and it will happen again, where we've had to have conversations with those who support a young person to go, we are struggling to find a right strategy or a plan that actually works and doesn't lead to difficulties and also distraction across the broader class. And sometimes those conversations with those who support a young person have led to new learning and new conversations and new understanding, and actually in the barrier cycle, a little bit of redesign. A little bit of actually, let's think about this differently. Actually, what we're trying to do is support a young person to fit within a structure that just isn't working. So let's redesign that stuff. And sometimes it's led to a mutual agreement that right here, right now is not the time and space, and it's just not going to work out. But the door is never closed, and maybe we can reassess and explore this again. So it goes back to the power of the voice. It's the conversation, and it's the fact that I think when you turn around, when you approach people and say, I want to talk about this, I want to find a way for this to happen. And I think most people, or some of the parents I talk to about young people who have more behavioral issues, they do two things. One is they say, well, we just don't even bother trying sometimes because we think we know what's going to happen around a conversation, and or they feel that there's never actually a conversation about, well, this isn't working, but might there be a way this works? It feels all a bit binary, a bit black and white. And so it's going back to the original point of going, actually, what's our motivation? What are we looking to try and achieve, and how can we help you to do it? And is there a redesign? Is there a different way we can do this? Can the young person come in for 10 minutes for week 1, 15 minutes week 2, 20 minutes week 3? Can we kind of explore that. Is it a particular part of the session that's more upsetting? Can we, if there's a break in a session, and that tends to be more problematic, can we find a much more wraparound scaffold supporting the breakout bit, and then we go back into it? So there are always options to explore, and there are always thoughts to be had and questions to be asked. It's about your own capacity to engage in those things, and I talk from a position of, I guess, part privilege, because we have full-time jobs here, so we have the capacity to have those conversations with people. If you are running a structure where you are back-to-back 3 classes on a night, 3 stuff, I get those limitations, and I get that not, this is slightly ideal world, and maybe there are some scenarios where that's more difficult. Yep. But ultimately, it's about exploring with people how might a solution be found together.
Yes, and I think it's also worth mentioning sometimes that teachers are held in quite high esteem or seen as authority figures and stuff. So some conversations, I think, are helpful sometimes, where you can say, look, if you're uncomfortable talking to me, can I find someone is there someone you're more comfortable talking to about this, and so on, because people can become tongue-tied with people they admire or people that they want to impress, and so on and so forth. They don't necessarily feel comfortable owning up that this is hard.
Yeah, I think that's what you just said there is, and I kind of switch my head back to, as a parent of a child as well. Actually, I would want someone to come to me and go, do you know what? I really want to support your young person, but I am struggling because I don't have experience, or I don't have solutions, or I don't have capacity to do that. And I wanted to have that conversation with you and be upfront and honest about that. And I think I hope most people are sadly celebrate honesty and celebrate that kind of, when people reach out to you and go, I don't know what to do, but I'd like to find something that works. Because often, like I said before about the strategies and mechanisms, often people they have these from other places and spaces. Things might work somewhere else, and maybe it's about looking at what they do at football or what they do when they go to school. Are there other strategies that can be brought across into the space, actually?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So it is 4 minutes to the hour. So there is just one, I think, which might be quite quick. One more question, and I'm really sorry for any other answers which we haven't got to yet, but Martin has said that he'd be most open and most willing to be contacted via Tin Arts for anybody that would like to engage with him. He doesn't promise a speedy answer necessarily, but he will answer everything eventually. So if you would like to engage with Martin directly, he would welcome that. So just one more question off the Q&A. To offer attention and dedicate different attention to each difference to be addressed and taken care of, what do you think is the best ratio of students and facilitators? And if so, how many assistants would you suggest?
Okay, so at Tin Arts, we work on no more than 8 students to each leader in a room. So we have so again, it's about context. So our studio space only takes 16 people to be an effective space where people can still move fully and thoroughly. So maximum numbers are 16, always have 2 leaders and who co-lead within that. When we get down to under 8, well, actually, ratio is 1 to 8, but actually, even if we only have 6 people in the room, again, we recognize the privilege that we still have 2 leaders in the room. Yeah. Actually, but yeah, so I recognize that from schools, and 1 in 8 and 1 in 50, but yeah, so we have 1 in 8 and 2 in 16. But where we work a lot with parents as well, actually. So we are very open to parents being in sessions and supporting, and either supporting consistently or supporting in a kind of drop in, drop out. We have a room next to where we are, they can sit and watch. We have no restriction on parents being in the space. But like I say, it's about the environment. So all young people know that other young people might bring their parent into the space. So it's an accepted thing of how we work. It's part of it. So yeah, so those are, very quickly, those are ratios, and that's what we do with support.
Fabulous, Martin. Thank you. It's certainly an idea, and it's something for everyone to think about. So with 2 minutes to go, I must wrap up I'm afraid. It's been amazing. Thank you, Martin, for making it so. On behalf of Safer Dance, we really appreciate it. And I'm sure everybody who's attended today is extremely grateful and feels the better for it. Thank you, Erin, so much for handling all our texts and answering questions and supporting us in this. And from us at Safer Dance to you participants, we really hope that you gain something useful from this session today. And again, we will put a recording of this online as soon as we can. So feel free to access it yourselves if you'd like to renew any of the Martin slides at future time to be helpful. But also feel free to signpost others to it. It's a free resource and it's available to anybody who goes to the website. And lastly, if you'd like to join Safer Dance, we would welcome your engagement. And again, you can find access at Safer Dance through our website and just send an email. Peter will receive it and will reach back out to you. We are, as he said, 75 already, and we welcome as much conversation on safe places and dance being brilliant as part of everybody's lives. So thank you for that. Erin, is there anything else that I need to cover before we sign out?